I knew this girl a while back who had kind of a strange habit. Um, she had this issue where if she'd ever heard the sound of somebody throwing up, she would actually have to run to the bathroom and throw up. And I guess it was more of a compulsion of hers where she didn't hardly have any control over it. Because if she didn't make it to the bathroom, she'd basically throw up wherever she was. And of course, we all thought this was hilarious for some reason. I mean, for some reason, you kind of don't really make a big deal out of it because it's someone else's strange deal and not yours, and it's kind of out of the ordinary, so it's not really a big deal for some reason, even though we thought that it was really odd. And of course this girl would have to throw up 3 or 4 times just in our class alone because everybody made fun of her for it. People would pretend to throw up because even if she heard that sound, no matter whether it was actually somebody throwing up or not, she'd have to run to the bathroom. Kind of odd that just a few years later I wound up with a bit of an issue of my own, and I suppose you could call it poetic justice, though it's kind of funny how it happens to some people but it doesn't happen to others. It just doesn't really have any sort of rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes you have a problem and sometimes you don't. I decided to go on ahead and make this video now of all times because you've probably noticed that there are some scratch marks on my face. I figured I should make this before they kind of heal up completely, because it's something that I really, that I really hide as best as I possibly can. But I think it's because of that I kind of need to show it as much as possible to people, so that they can kind of understand that were it not for my condition of just being bothered by noises, I really wouldn't have this issue. The condition can get particularly bad if a person with misophonia, or 4S as it's called, selective sound sensitivity syndrome, has something to drink. It can really mess with you, because a lot of people who wind up with this issue wind up quite a bit depressed, and they find that if they drink something, then it kind of helps calm them down a little bit, or it kind of dulls the senses, you know. But the bad thing about that is that if you get upset while you're drunk, as it is with pretty much anybody, you'll get really upset and do something stupid. So you can imagine somebody with a rage response associated with all kinds of noises that would be typical sounds that you would encounter all over the place. If something happens at the wrong time when I've had something to drink, then it can be pretty bad, which is exactly what happened to my face. Normally this doesn't happen to me because it's something that I've kind of controlled over the years, but sometimes if I get into a particularly bad state, I'll get really upset. I guess I should probably explain a little bit about my condition a little. Around about halfway through high school, as I said earlier, I had this issue where my dad developed a persistent cough. And it wasn't really that big of a deal to the family, or really even to me at that time, because I didn't really get bothered by stuff like that. You know, I was pretty much just like anybody else. And it got to the point where he was coughing all the time, and we were kind of worried about it, but at the same time also kind of irritated by it, because if you're trying to watch TV or something, and I remember this particularly, I was trying to hear something and I couldn't because Dad would always cough right during like the key points in the sentences where you would be able to understand what was being said, and it got kind of irritating. And everybody got irritated at him, and we found out that it was just a nasal blockage issue. And I mean, we didn't figure there was anything wrong with him, but regardless of the fact that it was an issue, we found that it was kind of annoying. But everybody eventually got over the annoyance associated with it, because that's what happens, when you have to put up with something for a while, eventually you get used to it. Especially if it turns out that there's nothing that can be done about it, or it's not the person's fault who's doing it, or anything like that. But that's not what happened with me.